Profiles in Courage, written by John F. Kennedy and his ghostwriter Ted Sorensen from 1956, is a volume of short biographies profiling 8 U.S. senators and their respective acts of bravery and integrity. At this time, John F. Kennedy was a U.S. senator and later won a Pulitzer Prize for this book. Now, the book's core themes of political courage is built on the construction of narratives through in-depth research. JFK leads readers to ask themselves the vital questions such as what is or is not courage, how to be courageous, and when should you be courageous. To first be able to define courage, we should establish what it isn't. Courage by no means is any purely reckless, stubborn, or deliberately difficult act. When Kennedy presents examples such as Ohio's the Nuremberg trials of Nazi leaders because he believed they violated, it's understandable for readers to be led to believe an act of courage is like any move towards or supporting an unpopular action. Now, while courage can sometimes put the actor in these situations or these feelings, this isn't the exact definition of bravery or courage. It's simply a reason why we admire the trait. What's noticeable about all the presented examples of courage are that these figures are devoted to some unifying or underlying principle. Some seek to fully represent the people even when the people don't realize what's truly best for them. Others display courage through taking a more holistic approach to representation and chose to represent and prioritize American virtues such as unity, due process, and among many others. Now, a couple exhibited courage through the commitments to strengthening America in the long term and not prioritizing quick popular trade-offs to America's future generations now. Grasping a public servant's first responsibility to build for the future is just as remarkable and bold as casting a decisive, controversial ballot in front of the Senate and the country. While the actions courage demands for can be flashy and dramatic, Kennedy wants the readers to understand that it's the strength of the devotion we have to these causes that makes our courageous actions notable. Sure, for George Norris of Nebraska completely opposing the U.S. entry into World War I and attacking his own party's leadership over corruption and excessive executive power is impressive, but what's more impressive is the sort of deep understanding of your task and values that leads you to advocate in a way that forces you to pay a political and personal price that just feels just. Now again, George Norris is one figure who exemplified courage through not just one act of courage, but a lifetime of important actions and stances. The most noble action was his opposition of America's entry into the First World War. He truly believed that US's entry was not a war to express America's virtues of democracy or freedom, but a war for big business at the expense of ordinary Americans. He saw the war as the serving economic interests of people at the top, the figures who could capitalize off of manufacturing munitions. Going back to American virtues, he believed America should be an isolationist. Joining the war would drag America into destructive foreign conflicts with small or little benefit for America. The last reason he didn't believe in the American entry was this sort of democratic idealism. He believed true democracy was listening to the people at home and not catering to special interests. By resisting the war declaration, he wanted to preserve American democracy from being hijacked by foreign economic elites. Now, Norris was one of only a few senators who disagreed with the American entry. Some accused him of being a pro-Nazi sympathizer, a bystander to challenges to the global system, and unpatriotic. But despite these concerns, Norris believed in the preservation of American democracy and the common people, even when the figures he was representing didn't understand what was the best for them. Apart from a single act of strong political opposition, Norris would later break from his party by criticizing and calling attention to corruption inside of his Republican Party. Also, on the sunset of his political career, he would advocate for the Tennessee Valley Authority Project. This project would bring electricity to rural areas. Like the opposition to the entry into World War I, the plan was heavily unpopular at first. However, later it ended up becoming a landmark achievement for George Norris in the end. John Quincy Adams' moment of courage came from putting perspectives into his advocacy, of asking himself the question of what would be the best solution in the long term for a small budding country. Adams broke with his Federalist Party to support Thomas Jefferson, a Democratic Republican. The most notable was his support of the Louisiana Purchase. Most Federalists hate the Purchase. They didn't want to cede any ground to a rival party and believed it would weaken New England's power as a central economic hub. However, John Quincy Adams knew that this commerce, shipping, and building strong urban centers solely in New England. Doubling the size of the U.S., securing control of New Orleans and the Mississippi River, while removing some European competition in the Americas and providing land for future generations was not necessarily a purchase for direct results, but an investment in the diversification of America's economic power for future generations to grow and develop. While John Quincy Adams was correct in that the Louisiana Purchase was one of the best decisions in the infancy of the United States, he was severely punished by his party. He was forced to resign from the Senate in 1808 and was branded a traitor by the Federalist Party. Kennedy admired Adams as someone who showed that true courage means risking career and comfort by putting country over party. A third example of political courage comes from Senator Edmund G. Ross of Kansas. For his courageous act, he cast the vote to not impeach President Andrew Johnson. During the Reconstruction after the Civil War, Andrew Johnson was at the time and still is seen as a controversial and ineffective president, especially in the context of post-Civil War Reconstruction. He opposed giving full civil rights to freed slaves, frequently vetoed legislation passed by Congress, including the Civil Rights and Reconstruction Acts, and his legacy is solidified by being the first president to face impeachment. Ross heavily disagreed with Johnson's policies. As a radical Republican, Johnson attempted to single-handedly block every move his party tried to make. While he believed in the removal of a president like Johnson, he decided not to cast the deciding vote in whether Johnson was impeached, as he believed that impeachment was politically motivated and not a true constitutional violation. He stayed true to the idea of impeachment as a way to constitutionally check the executive branch. Given that the impeachment was mainly due to stubborn political conflicts with Congress and not a true violation of the Constitution, Ross believed it was unethical too and would set a bad example for the powers of impeachment if Congress would check the president based on his disagreements and lack of cooperation rather than a clear constitutional violation. Now, overall, a key idea of Profiles in Courage is that bravery takes many forms. Now, this book hones in on political courage, which Kennedy defines as the ability to put principle over popularity, to act in service of conscience, duty, and public good, even when it's certain that these acts can detriment one's career, reputation, or safety. Now, political courage is just one way an individual can act with bravery and initiative. You can find personal courage through admitting mistakes and taking responsibility, social courage through expressing yourself instead of trying to fit in, or even emotional courage by being vulnerable and sharing feelings, asking for help, etc. The underlying theme of what bravery is finding that devotion inside yourself. Once you find that devotion in yourself, courage will make sense in the moment, as it's the ability to stay true to your principles and virtues to give service to the common good.